Hey, everybody. Welcome to Tech Guys Who Invest. We're super excited to have Matt Dunn from Right Move Properties on the show. Matt, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Looking forward to this.
We're looking forward to hearing all about the vehicle in your background, which we'll get to later in this conversation. But investing for cash flow, to my understanding, is what really gave you the ability and the choice to be able to do something like that and exit the rat race. Just share with our listeners how you were able to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. It starts back in 2016. I discovered a movement called the FIRE movement. I think you've had some guests on the show before which have talked to that topic in the past. But basically, we were planning on using aggressive saving for about 7 to 10 years to basically get to enough savings within our brokerage accounts and retirement accounts to have those dividends pay for our expenses. We did that for like a year, and I'm like, this is going to take forever, probably like 10, 12 years. So there was actually a few people within that community that were real estate investors, rental property specifically. So basically I tuned into that to figure out, is that something that I could, kind of educate myself on. I was a little bit intimidated at first, to be honest, on the cap rates, and I didn't really understand all the terminology. But long story short, I decided to give it another listen. This was back in late 2016, and actually purchased my first full unit through a residential agent who was a friend of mine who I purchased my primary through. And we closed on that in April of 17. And that was my first kind of step into multifamily rentals.
Man, so Matt, at the time, you were working a W-2 job, right?
Exactly. Yep. I was working as an after sales area manager for an exotic car company. So lots of travel, lots of hotels.
Yeah, nice. I think a lot of people who listen to the show are kind of in that same boat where they have a W-2. They're looking at getting into investing and what that can do for them. So, hearing a story like this where you're able in just a few years to go from that position to
Right.
traveling in an RV is full time. It's
Exactly.
pretty cool.
No, I didn't take that one property. I wish it did. That would have been great.
That would have been awesome. Before we move on to another investing question, I got to ask, what has been your favorite exotic car to drive?
I'd say the McLaren P1. So a lot of my dealerships that were shared with also exotic brands. So when that car first came out, I had an opportunity to take it out around Tampa one time. So I still have good memories of that experience.
Absolute dream car. That's what I would, if I had the money, I would definitely splurge on that and drive it once a year.
Exactly. The tires alone are like, $4,000 for a set. So it's insane.
So Matt, I want to follow up with you. So you're working a W-2, you start aggressively saving and learning how to save, and then you buy a small multifamily property that starts generating some cash flow, right? And
Exactly.
then is that at that point were you pretty much able to do what you're doing now, or what happened from there?
No, far from it. That set the seed for, that was the light bulb moment. I'm like, because it was very intimidating. Even I remember driving back from the closing table. I'm like, I'm now a landlord. I decided to self-manage, and I had a plan. I mean, I educated myself on what I was doing and self-managing, so I was able to understand, how to manage. And then I spent 9 months renovating all those units to bring them up to market rent because it was severely undervalued. And effectively was able to cash out refi about 9 months later. And actually, I used the HELOC from our primary to fund the renovations because I purchased my primary back in 2012. So I had lots of equity in that I was able to tap into. And then by the time my renovations were done, I was able to cash out, refinance, pay that HELOC back to zero. And I'm like, this is great. I'm going to just keep doing this.
Awesome. That is fantastic. With that, so you're leveraging money. You're doing what banks do, where they leverage money that they have, and just keep kind of that increasing that time velocity of money. I love it. I absolutely love it. Now, when we're talking about FIRE in general, right? You started with the saving, to Adam's point. What convinced you to say, you know what, I want to look into real estate as opposed to, I don't know, maybe investing for dividends or something else?
Yeah, I mean, I was all in on the dividend investing. You know, we at our peak, we were up to about 65, 70% savings rate. But even at
Wow.
that, it's a good 7 years, you know, to get to a modest 40,000 a year, you know, which using the 4% rule would be about $1 million in investments. I thought, this is going to take too long. You know, I don't want to be in this W-2 any longer. There were some pressures from, you know, from the position I was in, and I just wanted an accelerated way to build that passive income.
So is real estate proven to be that for you? I mean, I would say so, probably
Oh
based
yeah,
on what you're doing now. But
100%. Yeah, no, I you know, shortly after that purchase, I was able to buy a 3-unit in another local market where I was living at the time. And that, you know, I always look for about $250 per unit in cash flow. And at the start of this, I knew how many units I would need to get to that number. So, you know, having that vision and kind of reverse engineering how many units you would need was kind of my starting path.
yeah, awesome.
Working backwards. That's awesome. So with increasing your cash flow comes with sacrifices, maybe decreasing your expenses. Could you mind sharing how difficult that was, or expenses you realized, you know what, we really don't need to be spending money on Netflix, Hulu, or something along those lines?
100%. Yeah, you know, you have to get your financial house in order and figure out, track your spending. You know, what are you actually spending? That's what the FIRE movement kind of talks about all the time. And there's a good app actually that I use religiously to track my spending at the beginning, and it just kind of like shows you your cash flow, what's coming in, what's going out, and you can link all of your accounts to it. So that was awesome. And just figuring out, okay, what unnecessary expenses do we have? You know, we were paying $200 a month in cable, for example. We didn't need all those channels. Shopping around for better insurance quotes, you know, subscriptions, those kind of things. Just, you know, really eat into your money. You don't even realize they're getting paid sometimes.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so I'm curious, Matt, what you think about the how do I say this? Like, what's more important? I know they're both important, and maybe one's not really more important than the other. But when you think about saving, aggressively cutting costs, not saving, sorry, but cutting costs, cutting expenses, cutting those recurring expenses, versus generating more cash flow. Maybe the question is, what did you choose to focus on more?
Well, the nice thing about cutting expenses is it's basically a tax-free pay rise, right? So that's the way I was looking at that. Anytime I could save money, that's a tax-free bump. So that was my priority, you know, in the beginning. So that was, you know, that for me was where we started, and that's kind of where a lot of education stemmed from. And also not having bad debt is huge. We've always been ones to have everything paid for, so all of our vehicles were paid for. So we had good debt, we had mortgages, but all of those properties are rentals. So that, you know, that was great. And then when we actually left for our trip, our primary we turned into a rental too. So that mortgage is also getting covered by the resident.
It's almost like you're breaking it down so simply, where you say, okay, this is this expense. How can I create cash flow that's going to pay for that expense? Whether that's a dividend, or if it's a rental. In your case, it's primarily rentals or real estate, but it could be notes. There could be a multitude of ways that you could diversify to create that cash flow. And that, I love it. That's fantastic that you're on the same page there and you're doing that. So tell us, how is it living in an RV? I know that I've thought about it. I know Adam has even more seriously thought about it, and we have friends that do it like you. So we want to hear from you.
Well, it's funny. So I never thought of ourselves as living in an RV ever. You know, we just, that wasn't something that my wife and I had ever talked about. And it stemmed actually from a vacation back in the UK in 2019. We rented a Airbnb that we kind of booked at last minute. There wasn't much availability, but there was a single wide mobile home in North Wales. That was the only thing left in this part of the country we wanted to visit. So I got in a little bit of trouble for booking it, but it turned out perfect, because we get to this this mobile home, and it was a little 2-bedroom. I think it was like a 12 by 25 or something. And we were like, had 2 bedrooms, you know, a little bedroom for the kids, bedroom for us, you know, a good sized kitchen and living area. and we were in it for a couple of nights, and it was like, you know what, we could actually live in one of these and like really save a ton of money. And it kind of set up a bit of a seed for us. So, fast forward a couple of years, and things kind of accelerated in terms of my, the cash flow. I wasn't expecting to have enough cash flow until 2021, but we pulled the plug a year early. Decided we'd do, an RV trip. COVID was really the big factor for that too. We did, just getting out from our own four walls was something we wanted to do. And, as we all know, that RV sales and that lifestyle has just exploded in the last 12 months. So in terms of what it's been like, honestly, the first 2 months kind of felt like a vacation. I've been in a job ever since I left university, and never taken a large sabbatical or anything like that. So it kind of felt like I was still on vacation for a couple months. And then after that sort of 2.5 months, I'm like, you know what, I kind of need to get some focus and get some direction for the business. Obviously I was still maintaining my portfolio, but I wanted to grow and, do more things. So I ended up joining a mentorship program in December 2020. So I have a coach and I have some direction, which has been super helpful. And then in terms of the actual RV experience, you have to be kind of handy. RVs are not designed to be lived in full time, even the $300,000 ones. Stuff always breaks, and you have to be kind of handy. If you're not handy, you're going to end up having that RV in the repair shop, and those guys can take a while to get them fixed. And if you're living in it, that can be a little bit difficult. So fortunately, being an auto mechanic from many moons ago, I can repair most stuff. So I have, that ability, which is super helpful. We also appreciate water and electric conservation a lot more than we ever thought of before. So when we're dry camping, or boondocking as they call it, we have a 40-gallon freshwater tank and a 30-gallon gray and a 30-gallon black tank. And you have to be very conscious of how much water you're using at all times when you're doing that. And electric too. If we turn on the microwave, the AC, and the water heater at the same time, that pretty much trips off power. So you have to be mindful of what you're turning on and when you need it. So yeah.
Man,
I love it.
Yeah, it's like a
so
mindfulness
cool.
exercise is what it sounds like.
Right? All these little things that you've never thought about in a certain way, or little things you learn or pay attention to from a different context about life, like just the day to day. It's very interesting. Matt, what do you love most about it?
I would say arriving at new places, exploring. So we have two young daughters, they're 5 and 3. So we love to hike. We have mountain bikes with kid seats on the back. So we'll go explore new areas on the bikes. If we're in a kind of a cool town with a good trail system, we'll often kind of jog with a stroller and explore local parks and playgrounds. And it's actually neat because when we go to playgrounds, that is the best way to actually get good intel for local tips, is meeting other parents.
Nice.
So yeah.
I love it.
That's really cool. So what is not so ideal about it? Almost like, what do you miss about having a full-time residence?
I guess I feel like I would have had a lot more spare time than I do. You hear this, I know, when people retire, but I figured, yeah, I'll have a little spare time to work on like the business, and you still have to be super disciplined, because it's a bit of a challenge, because you want to kind of check out new places because you may not ever be there again, but you also need to get stuff done as well. So it's you've got to be very disciplined with your time. Honestly, we do miss just having a routine when you're moving so much, because we've done 18 states, 16 national parks. Actually it was a year yesterday we left. So it's it's been a long time, and honestly, this was never something we planned on doing indefinitely. We're actually looking to we'll be back into a regular home probably by the end of this year.
All right. And Matt, you mentioned something earlier about after a couple of months, it was time to get back into some business activity of some sort. So can you talk to us a little bit about what you're focusing on right now?
Yeah, 100%. So I'm continuing to do multifamily, but I've decided to focus solely on commercial multifamily. So an important point, when you leave a W-2, it's a lot harder to get residential financing because typically a conventional lender will look at your income, right, in your W-2. Having not had that, for a year, I was very mindful of making sure that, I set everything up ahead of time. So in terms of what I'm working on, so commercial multifamily, so apartment buildings. Actually, we're looking to have an 8-unit under contract tomorrow, most likely in Florida. And then I'm also looking to do some more bigger deals. Been pretty active with working on capital raising for a previous deal. Didn't pan out fully, but we've got those partners on board for another deal. So I'm really excited to get them into something and focus predominantly in Florida on between 10 and 70 units is the criteria right now.
Wonderful. That's I think an important distinction. You talk about 8 units, that is technically commercial. Anything more than 5. So when people hear commercial, if you're listening to this, it doesn't have to be these massive apartment complexes that look like neighborhoods that you can purchase. Although you can get something like a 5-unit, and that still technically requires commercial lending. Now, with all of these properties, and you have the RV, so you can go to different properties where you own. I'm assuming you don't self-manage, but I mean, if somebody had a problem, you could take your RV and go there, right?
Exactly. Yeah, we could do that. In fact, I've been doing some interesting, like just observations in different cities we've been visiting, just to see if it was a town I may be interested in investing in the future. So I have been making notes on different places that I've found interest in. On Boise, Idaho being a case in point, that's got phenomenal rental potential. So if anyone wanted to invest there, I'd have a lot of comfort with that market. So anywhere we've spent a month is usually when I can get more work done and I get a good feel for that town. So I'll typically start looking at potential of that market.
So when you say as you're driving, you're observing stuff, what is it that you're looking for? And you don't have to give the secret sauce, but maybe just an idea that people can say, you know what, maybe I should have kind of opened my eyes to that as well.
Yeah, I typically look for, so I guess there's a few things. So in terms of when we're actually driving physically, because I do a lot of my kind of research on behind a computer as well. But I'll look for, the types of businesses that are in the area. I love to see, Panera Bread, Starbucks, Chipotle, those kind of chain restaurants, parks, lots of green space, good public transport, I've got a good radar, I feel like, for where somebody would want to live. And, I'm looking for kind of B minus kind of neighborhoods for potential growth.
Okay.
Yeah, interesting. And Matt, being remote or, work sort of not being on site, it's important to have team members who you can rely on. What team members do you think someone should consider having on their team when they're investing passively?
Yeah, I mean, property management is absolutely key. So, I have property managers on all of our assets. I actually have different managers on everything. Even though some of them I could combine, I don't do that just in case I do need to make a change. I don't want to have to make too many changes to my properties. So that's probably the number one. Now I do self-manage. There's one other asset I didn't mention yet. We have a short-term rental cabin in the Smoky Mountains of Tennessee that does incredibly well from a cash flow standpoint. And I do self-manage that, but that is very doable with all the automation that exists today. But for my long-term stuff, it's important to keep a key PM. They're the ones that have your maintenance, kind of requests to hand. And they're the ones ultimately, deciding upon your residence. So that's a huge team member.
Perfect. So how do you recommend people find these team members? Is it as easy as Googling them and then doing a cold outreach? Do you do it through networking? What have you found to be the most successful?
Referrals would be, my number one. That's going to carry the most weight. Who else is using them? They got good things to say. I'm actually looking for one right now for this property that I just mentioned, because that's the market I'm not currently located in. So I will be physically meeting them. I'll have them, meet them at the asset. I'll get their opinion on what they would do with the property. I'd like to know, how they screen their residents, what the criteria is. what do they do above and beyond, and also do some mystery shopping as well. I think that's important. Just kind of do an inquiry like you're a resident and actually kind of see how they respond, how quick they are they up to the times with technology? Can you do an online application? Are the photographs good? There's a lot of different things you can do remotely to check that stuff.
So Matt, if someone's listening and they've been thinking about how they can position themselves to escape the rat race, what advice might you give them to start out, get themselves in a position where one day they could do something like what you've done?
Yeah, first things would be to get your financial house in order. Figure out really what your core monthly expenses are, um, and you got to track what you're spending. So once you know what that is, then eliminate as much liability debt as possible, and then set yourself up. Because I'll give you an example. So we actually we opened up a HELOC just a couple months before I left my W-2, because I knew it'd be very difficult to get that once I was no longer employed. So getting yourself set up like that is critical. Don't procrastinate though. Once you figured out your number, and if you've got that number, then then do it. I think a lot of people feel a little bit trapped by the comfort of being an employee. Whether it be that retirement 401k match, or the health insurance, or perhaps they're working towards a promotion and they get it, and then they feel like kind of trapped with that extra work pressure. So don't put it off. I don't regret for a second the decision that we made, and that's the best thing I've done.
That's cool to hear.
Getting your financial house in order is huge, because like you said, it's almost like having a leaky faucet somewhere in the house, right? You're just like, where is it? And I love that there seems to be a lot of carryover between RV life and trying to become financially free, because you are cognizant of every action, of every spend. Like you mentioned, how much energy are you really using? So I just am I love that parallel between the two aspects. So if somebody has a W-2 and they want to start learning about how to get their financial house in order, what to look for, what resources would you recommend to them?
So number one thing is tracking your budget. So there's a number of good apps. Personal Capital is one I personally use a lot. That one allows you to link all of your accounts to it. You can see what's going out, what's going in. That's huge. That was probably the number one thing. And then just start going. Once you've identified those expenses, actually, make a note to see, is that a necessary expense? Can we remove that? Or can we bring that price of that expense down? I think that carries arguably more weight than trying to get more income. Because with more income, especially on the W-2 side, comes usually a bit more responsibility. So if you're intending on exiting, you want to try and kind of transition out. And yeah, those are the major tips. I will say, the one thing that I have found with no longer having a manager, I'm self-managing myself. You have to be disciplined and set your own schedule. No one's going to tell you when to do this or what time you need to go to work. So having that discipline to time block and work on what you want to work on. And you need to know what your whys and what your goals are. That's huge. You can't just say I want to quit my job because I don't like it. I'm going to go do real estate. You have to figure out why am I actually doing this? What's the big reason for it? And that'll carry you through the tough times, because this real estate can have its challenges.
Yeah, that's huge. I think that's really solid advice. People have this romantic idea in their head of quitting their job, and then if they don't have those goals, and if they're not prepared to be disciplined about that structure of their day, then they're probably going to be unhappy. Uh, yeah, that's really good. So, Matt, I know the answer to this will probably change over time and depending on, I don't know, depending on a lot of different factors. But right now, is there a particular cash flowing asset type that you feel is better than others, or at least is just a really, really good one for someone who's more focused on investing for cash flow because they would like to, live off of their passive income?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I was definitely focused on the cash flow side. In in terms of the plan. So it does differ. You're 100% correct. Um, Ultimately, I think it's about finding what you enjoy doing and getting really good at that one thing. I meet a lot of people on our travels, especially in our current lifestyle, that ask me, "What do you do for work?" And I tell them, and they're like, "Oh, I can never deal with tenants," but they don't really understand, what that entails. You have a property manager, and there's so many benefits of real estate. And once I get start explaining that to them, I think that flicks a bit of a switch. And I've had quite a few people reach out to me, wanting to get more information and resources, things like that after I've met them. Personally, for me, I think multifamily is the best asset. I chose it predominantly at the beginning because I felt like single family homes, for example, when you've got that person moving out, you're 100% vacant. Even if it's a duplex, at least you've got 50% of that income still coming in to cover your expenses. That was the main reason I chose multifamily. I think it's ultimately about, what you're passionate about. What are you going to stay in it for the long run on? I know people that do really well with mobile home parks, and they kill it with cash flow. So it's about, finding an asset class and sticking with it. It's very easy in real estate to get overwhelmed with all the different strategies. I definitely was looking all over the place when I first got started. So, pick what you want to do and stick with it.
Fantastic. Well, it kind of answered the question of if you could go back in time and teach your younger self something. I'm guessing it's having to really focus on and hone on something, because you're right. If you listen to this podcast, you listen to a dozen other podcasts, you'll find somebody making money in some niche, and you could jump from each of those things. And then a year later, you're like, I never took enough action to make money in anything. So I love that piece of advice. So as a tech guys who invest, we wouldn't be the tech guys who invest if we didn't ask you a tech related question, but we're going to do it a little bit differently. I'm thinking with regards to the RV, what's a piece of technology that you wish an RV had that you're currently missing?
Actually, I didn't prepare for this question, but I have it instantly comes to mind. So it would be a leveling system. That is the worst thing I have to do whenever I get to an RV park. You see these like $200,000 rigs. They basically just park up in their spot. They hit a few buttons. The wheels come off the ground. These struts come out, and the thing self levels. So all they have to do is plug in their power and plumbing, and they're good to go. I'm out there with a spirit level and a cordless drill, trying to level this thing with blocks under the wheels sometimes. So I wish our RV had a self leveling system.
Nice. Hey, that's awesome. All right, Matt. Well, hey, it's been great having you on. We're so glad to have you on the show. And if people want to reach out to you and connect with you, what's the best place for them to find you?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm on Facebook. You can find me under Matt Dunn. Also LinkedIn. You can reach me on direct phone number is 941-504-0548, or email's also good. That's rightmoveproperties@mail.com. So not Gmail, just mail.com.
All right, Matt. Thanks again for coming on. It was great having you on the show.
I appreciate it, guys. Thanks so much. Had a blast.